everyone. I'm going to teach you about variation in chapter 1 Mathematics KSSM Form 5. So in variation, we are going to learn about direct variation. So what's the meaning of direct variation? Direct variation explains relation between two variables of x and y. So when y increase, the x will be also increase at the same rate and vice versa. So that means when y decrease, the x will be also decrease. This relation can be written as y varies directly as x. Now we are going to look at the example question. The total wage of a part-time worker, I will state the as y as a worker varies directly as number of hours he works. I will state this as x. State the change on the total wage if the number of working hour is double. So, if the working hour, the x is doubled, that means the y will be also be doubled. So, the solution for A is the total wage also will be doubled. So, for the B, the total wage if the number of working hours decrease by 40%. So, if the working hours decrease by 40%, if the x decrease by 40%, the y also will be decreased by 40%. So now we're going to learn about the relation between two variables for a direct variation. So in the direct variation, y varies directly as x, and it can be written as in two forms, which is the first one is variation relation and the second one is an equation form. So in variation relation, you have to use the symbol of ikan, you know. So y symbol ikan, x. So in equation form, you have to replace that symbol ikan with equals to k, which is the k is a constant where each pair of number has the same ratio. Therefore, the constant k equals to y over x. So as you can see in the example graph, when the y increase, the x will be increased because this is a direct variation. So you have to also remember in direct variation, there are also a joint variation. Whereas a joint variation is a direct variation which one variable varies as a product of two or more variables. So that means the y will be varies jointly as x or x and z, x, z and c, like that. So we are going to look at the example. Y varies jointly as x to the power of m and z to the power of n can be written in if in variation relation we have to use the ikan symbol, and yes. And in equation form, we have to replace the ikan symbol with k. That's it. So with that, with this method, you are going to gain the k. Next, we are going to learn about inverse variation. So what is the meaning of inverse variation? In inverse variation, variable y increase, x will be decreased at the same rate and vice versa. This relation can be written as y varies inversely as x. So now we are going to look at the inversely variation question example. Ming takes part in 42km marathon. The table below shows the relation between the time taken by Ming and his average speed. So now in this case, the time taken is increasing while his average speed is decreasing. As the question says, state the change in average speed if the time taken increased by 2 times. So if the time increased by 2 times, we have to times it by 2. And to know the average speed, we have to divide it by 2. Next, we are going to look at the B. If the time is decreased by 1.5 times, that means we have to divide the time with 1.5, and for the average speed will be increased, we have to time it by 1.5. So now we are going to learn about the relation between two variables for an inverse variation. In inverse variation, y varies inversely as x can be written in two forms, which is variation relation and also equation form. In variation relation, you have to remember, you have to use the ikan symbol, which is y ikan symbol 1 over x. In equation form pula, we have to replace it with k. So y equals to k over x. Whereas the k is a constant where each pair of number has the same product. Therefore, the constant k is equal to x times y. As you can see in the graph, when the x-axis is increasing, the y-axis is decreasing. That is an inverse variation.
Hello, now to continue, I will tell you about combined variation. So what exactly is combined variation? Well, as the name already indicates, it is a combination between both a joint variation, a direct variation, or an inverse variation, which would mean in one situation, it would involve the usage of both either a joint or a direct variation, and also an inverse variation at the same time. Here's an example. It is given that y varies directly as the square of x and inversely as the square root of z. If y equals to 8 when x equals to 4 and z equals to 36, express y in terms of x and z. Now, before we actually start looking at the question, let's look at the smart tips the textbook has gave us over here. So, number 1, y varies directly as w and the cube of x and inversely as the cube root of z, which you can write in how they have wrote it in the textbook over here. Number 2, y varies directly as the product of w square and square root of x and inversely as z cubed, which is, you can write it as they wrote it here too. So as you can see, you write down first whatever the question has gave you in a form like this so that you can see which one varies directly and which one varies inversely. So if you write it like this, you can see it easier because it's written in a shorter form. Now let's take a look at the question. So when you get the question like this, the first thing you're supposed to do is you write down whatever they gave you, as in which one varies directly and which one varies indirectly, in the form that they have gave in the example over here. So like the one that we already looked at the smart tips just now, so you have to write it in a form like this. So whichever varies directly, you put on the top tier, and the one that varies inversely, you put at the bottom tier. Which means, if it's on the top tier, it would mean like multiplication, and on the bottom tier, it would mean division. Which means, as we know, direct variation, it's when one variable increases, the other one will also increase. And inverse is vice versa. When one increases, the other one decreases. Or when one decreases, the other one increases. Just like that. So by right, we know if the one is on the top tier, that would mean when one increases, the other one increases. And when the one is on the bottom, which means you divide it, when the first one increases, the second one will decrease, which is how you would think of it logically. So you remember it like that, and it will help you understand better. The next thing you do when you have your equation that you've already read, the first thing you wrote when you get the question, the next thing you have to do is you write it in the form of an equation. It's literally just the same thing. The only different thing is you have a constant. And this constant is which will indicate like the rate of your variation. This constant, it is usually you'll indicate it using a k. Like in this question, in this example, they use the k. That's the only difference between the one you wrote and the one that is in the form of the equation. Then the next thing you're supposed to do is, now that you have all your variables in one short equation, all you have to do is the values that they have gave you in the question, you just substitute it into the question over here. So in this particular equation, the variables that we have are x, y, and z. So here they gave us the values of x, y, and z respectively. So they gave us y equals to 8. So in the position of y in our equation, we just add 8 there, just replace the y with 8. Then we have x equals to 4. So where our x was in our original equation, just substitute it with 4, and the same thing with z. Z here is 36. So what you need to do is you just take all the values that were given in the question and you put it inside your equation that you already have. When you've already substituted everything, you can see that all that we have now is just numbers, and we have one remaining variable that is an unknown. We don't know what it is, which is k. So what we want to do here is we're going to shift the k to the front so that we can get the value of the k, because now we're just left with numbers and one unknown. So we move the unknown to the front and we put all the rest of the numbers that we know to the other side, on the right hand side. And from there you can solve the equation and you can get the value of k. So from this equation, after you have already moved everything to the left side and the right side respectively, you will get that k equals to 3. So when you already get that k equals to 3, you will take the first equation that you made, the one that you made after you've added the constant k into the equation that you made first after you took out everything, all the information that they gave you in the question. Then all you have to do is you write down the same equation, exactly the same equation again, but you replace the k with what we have got just now, which is 3, because k is the constant and that will determine our rate of variation. So at the end, the answer you will get is y equals to 3x squared over the square root of z. So to conclude, a combined variation is when something varies directly and inversely at the same time, and it can be written as shown below. As per direct variation and inverse variation, there is also a constant involved, which is written as k. Thanks for sticking with us till the end. Till next time.